The word IoTA has two distinct meanings. As a noun, 1. A tiny or scarcely detectable amount. 2. The ninth letter of the Greek alphabet.
Good morning and welcome to IoTA for Monday, August 15th, 2016. I'm Tony Lynn. IoTA is a daily news podcast focused on the Internet of Things industry, and particularly in Atlanta. Whenever I can find Atlanta stories, we're going to talk about it here. Let's get started. You guys remember way back in November of 2006 when Jeff Bezos decided he wanted to spend all this money Amazon was making on this cloud service, and everybody thought, "Oh, Jeff, you're crazy. Why are you doing that? Why are you going to waste all our money? We haven't made a profit yet." Well, guess what? Fast forward to today, and Amazon is considered the leader of the space, and particularly in IoT reports CTO Vision. They just released their, not their earnings call, but it was a sort of a state of the technology video in which they talked about everything, along those cloud lines and IoT specifically. Just to note that currently Amazon IoT can be used for either large-scale deployments as well as the smaller home deployments. The Amazon Echo is a great example of how they're actually doing this in homes. They're trying to take over that market. Again, I love my Echo, and as well as they've also now got an IoT experiment kit. They don't call it a developer kit, they call it an experiment kit called the Intel Edison. And they actually have an IDE that's very drag and drop. They've designed it such that pretty much anyone can go do it. So bravo, Jeff Bezos. Way to think ahead there. Mary Shacklet reports that big data and IoT can solve food safety and supply challenges in Tech Republic. Back in 2011, President Obama signed into law a very strict food monitoring and traceability measure as a way to make our food safer. And while much has been done to comply with the law, currently IoT is making it possible to solve these issues. Considering back in 2011, there was IoT, at least in a low-level capacity, but the fact is now as the price drops and becomes more commoditized, it makes it a lot easier to do this. Currently, trucks can be equipped with sensors so that the location can be determined at any time, so you can determine whether it's been deviated off the course. Maybe it puts the food at risk. Also, in cases where you might need to reroute trucks in order to go to places in need, this can be done as well. IoT can also help maintain food levels and track how fast it's moving off the shelf. So although you've been able to do this with barcodes and canned goods and other goods that are already prepackaged, that's fine. But when you start dealing with fruits and vegetables and things that are not necessarily in those small containers and make it easier to do it, now they have the ability to also monitor and manage that. And not only monitor and manage it from the point of when they start to run out, but also when it starts to maybe spoil, particularly in the case of fresh vegetables and fruit. Refrigerated foods are now also packed with sensors inside to detect such things as humidity inside of it or that the seal itself was broken. There's a lot of really cool stuff going on in this space, and I do think that there's a lot of room for improvement yet. I know here in Georgia Tech, they've actually done a couple of sensors, wrapped around the fact of being able to detect for bacteria, particularly Listeria and others. The problem is they've not been able to find a good way to shrink it yet. They're working on it. All right, is Google is Google working on a new iOS just for IoT? According to the Deccan Chronicle, and I neglected to look to see where this was located because I have no idea. It seems like it's kind of an oddball thing to be reported on, but anyway, here we are. Google is working on a standalone OS not tied to Chrome or Android specifically, but specifically for IoT. The project is codenamed Fuchsia. The OS uses a custom kernel called Magenta, based on the little kernel, which is currently specifically designed for embedded systems. So I think this is pretty cool. The fact that right now, if you want to do any sort of coding for embedded systems, you either have to know C, C++, or in some cases, and we've reported on it already here, where some of the devices themselves are putting in custom versions of Android OS. You could use Java instead. In some cases, they're putting in the ability to do JavaScript. I think we even saw one for PHP earlier in the year. This actually is great help. So, think back along the lines of what some of these companies are doing to help get anyone into mobile. The fact that they now have this for IoT, I think will be a really, really cool thing. Okay, so John Kennedy reports in the Silicon Republic that an Irish IoT startup is winning the battle of IoT platforms here in the States. Darwin Networks has deployed an end-to-end IoT platform in Texas and Oklahoma, and they're currently working on a couple other states as well, that is designed to monitor and report on school buses. Now, this alone doesn't make it seem like they're ruling the U.S., but I guess it's called clickbait, and I fell for it. This is for safety and security of the students, as well as monitoring of the vehicles themselves in an attempt to reduce the carbon footprint of the buses. They're using a system called the Ruban platform, which helps increase productivity, safety, reduce fuel costs, optimize driving routes, and contract the vehicle. And finally today, actually it's not final, I've got another little thing I want to bring up in a second, but let's talk about this first. So the Buddy platform is bringing new meaning to the IoT data, reports Kate Lawrence and Reed Wright. In industries like viticulture, shipping, agriculture, and manufacturing, data has long been collected long before our current revolution. And the Buddy platform is now able to re-examine that data in context with new data being collected and provide real-time decision-making. Buddy is also building out a fully hosted, managed, all-scaling implementation of Parse, which I don't know if you remember Parse, but it was a way to actually directly get to APIs in order to do coding without having to worry about databases and that sort of thing. And I think Facebook actually either owns it or had it owned at one point. But they're doing a version of it targeted to high volume applications. Buddy's also on a tear to buy as many companies as it can, purchasing Zentree and Novita, so far this year. So again, this is, I think it's a little early to say that the whole consolidation is happening, but certainly there is some, the first, I guess, salvos are being thrown across the board. All right, so I want to bring something up real quick. We talk a lot here about how big and wide and expansive the IoT is, and the fact of it is that there's so much out there that it's hard for anyone getting into it to really understand where to start and what to do. So I'm going to share my screen real quick here, and while that comes up, there we go. So a buddy of mine, Tim Phillips, who he's here in Atlanta. He's been heavily involved in the IT space for some time. Found this over the weekend and sent it to me, and I thought this was a really good thing to talk about from the standpoint of just what is the ecosystem of IoT. So for those of you not actually on the video, it is called the Internet of Things Landscape for 2016, and it actually is broken down into three primary sections: an applications, platforms and enablement, and then building blocks. And each one of these sections, so just looking at applications themselves, it's broken down into personal, and underneath personal it has wearables, fitness, and health, and entertainment, and family, sports, toys, elderly. Then you have the home, and then in home you have automation, hubs, security, kitchen, sensing, consumer robotics, pets, garden trackers, and it goes on and on and on. And inside each one of these little boxes, they're showing the companies that are playing in these spaces. I remember a version of this from, and not this specifically, but for the social the social ecosystem, probably back in 2011. It looked very similar to this, and at the time, you could look at companies that were doing just document sharing. You could look at companies that were doing just image sharing, and over time, all those things started to to congregate and to coalesce into smaller or larger companies, but smaller categories. And I think right now we're seeing the same exact thing in IoT, and the number of players in every one of these areas is just fascinating to see. And again, it comes back to what I've said over and over again, is that you should not feel overwhelmed by this, even though looking at something like that would make you feel that way, that there's plenty of opportunity for all of us out here. And in fact, the more that exists now, the probably more stable that this industry will become, because if you can see that number of players now, as it does start to congregate, and I can't think of the word this morning for some reason, as it starts to do that, then everyone has an opportunity here. Anyway, I thought it was very interesting, and shout outs to Tim for sending us a little something for the podcast. Again, I'm very, very interested in seeing what you guys have to say, and it's starting to show me that we are getting a little bit of an audience, which is great. So if you want to get on the show and you want to maybe show off some of the stuff that maybe you want to send me a comment, I'd be glad to read your comments on the air. If you want to send me stories, please send me stories. If you like what we're doing and you want to see more of it, or you just want to be involved, feel free to support us. Go to patreon.com/Tonamuck and feel free to donate. As always, feedback is great. Like I said, send me whatever you can. My email address is tonamuck@gmail.com. You can find me on Twitter @Tonamuck, or you can find any of my projects at www.tonamuck.com. This is great. Good start to the week. Hope you guys have a great rest of the day. We'll talk to you soon.